Coming up on Windows Weekly, Paul and Mary Jo are here to talk about the Surface event that just happened this week, the Surface 2, the Surface Pro 2. We talk about the Windows roadmap, pudding, fish, and more.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley, episode 330, recorded September 26, 2013, Chaos for Good. It's time for Windows Weekly. This is the show where we take a long look at Microsoft, usually ask ourselves, why is Microsoft doing this? And then hopefully come up with the reasoning that we think Redmond came up with. Leo Laporte's on vacation. I'm Aya Zakhtar. You might have seen me on Tech News Today or Know How. I appear there and I talk. But you might see a different side of my face. So I look different straight on. But thankfully, since it's Windows Weekly, we've got Paul Thurrott here and Mary Jo Foley. They thankfully will be guiding us through this episode.
We just lost Mary Jo Foley.
We lost Mary Jo Foley. So now we will be freaking out because Mary Jo is out. It's all over. We're going to be crashing this episode with just
I do think you have a Carrie-like power because as soon as you said her name, she disappeared.
It is an impressive thing. Or I was hovering over the end call button or not. Well, Paul, how is it going? Well, as you are here, you are present, so that's a plus.
It's going pretty well. Mary Jo and I did go to the Surface 2 launch earlier in the week. Hopefully she'll be back to talk about that in a few minutes. But yeah, pretty good.
It's actually a big week of news for Microsoft, and one day when Microsoft Skype works, we will have Mary Jo Foley on relatively soon, unless, Paul, do you think this is a conspiracy theory to get Mary Jo to not talk about this? Because I know I read something about a Surface Mini this morning by Mary Jo.
Yeah.
And now, mysteriously, her connection drops out.
No, she's gone, yeah. No, actually, I'll say this, and actually Mary Jo's take on this would be interesting if only she was here. But I have to say one of the things that was nice about the event on Monday is that, Mary Jo and I both often feel like we're on the receiving end of some negative vibes from the Windows team in particular, and certainly from the Surface team as well. And, actually Monday, hold on one second, she's contacting me. She needs you to call them back.
They're working on it.
Yeah, I figured. So Monday, for whatever reason, I felt like, everything was okay. I mean, I had all of the information that they were announcing over a month ago. I didn't directly leak really any of it. As people started reporting on stuff, I was able to confirm some of that stuff and kind of held on to it. And that's the type of behavior that Microsoft doesn't typically reward, for some reason. But I felt like Monday that, it was almost like a kind of a grown-up response, which we had not received in the past, which was like, you guys are just doing your job and that's cool. And we appreciate that you write about our technology and stuff. And it's sort of the reaction I would expect to have, but, often don't get from Microsoft. So that was pretty good.
Mary Jo is back.
I'm back.
So you didn't leave in protest, did you?
No, I just blame Skype.
She just hates Surface so much as soon as we said that.
So we should talk about the giant news that happened. It was just this Monday. Surface 2, all kinds of things like this. It seems like all the information was leaked already. Paul, you mentioned you've known about this stuff for like a month or so. You guys attended the event. Who's the person doing the keynote? It was somebody in is it Panay?
Yeah, Panos Panay.
Panos Panay. I heard he was very different than the last Surface speaker.
Well, yes, he was.
There were no skateboards involved.
I'm not sure how to say this judiciously. He's a good guy.
Wow, the implications of that. Anyway, how was the actual event?
I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. I mean, I've heard some interesting reactions to it from people. People said, "Oh, the audience response was really muted." Yeah, well, we're
reporters.
We're not, cheerleaders for the company. It's not like an Apple event. I mean, I'm not going to cheer every time the guy makes an announcement about some feature that we, expect and want. I find that kind of behavior to be strange, but I think overall, most of the people there liked what they were seeing. I think there's some broad, strategic type questions that people have and should have around Microsoft and hardware business and all that kind of stuff. And we can talk about that. But I thought the event overall was good.
Yeah, I wish we had been able to take a device home, which we couldn't, because we weren't allowed to take them if they were even there. I heard they were there, but I don't know for a fact they were there. So they said they were going to send them to us in another week to 10 days from the date of the event. So we're going to get Surface 2s to review probably in another week. I also wish they had more hands-on units available, because as soon as the event was over, all the TV crews swarmed over and took over the
Yep.
Surfaces, right? And so we couldn't really try them out. I mean, you could try to grab one and try it for a bit, but it wasn't. If there had been more of them, I think it would have been better, so that we could have done things like really tried typing on the keyboard, really, gotten to put it on our lap and tried typing with it. It just was going to be too long a wait, and we just couldn't stick around to try to wait our turn in the long line of everyone else trying to do the same thing. So
I think we hopped over the actual event, as in what actually was presented.
We will get there. We will get there.
Oh, we're getting there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to Mary Jo's point there, I guess the only thing I'll say is that, both Mary Jo and I have been using Surface devices for the past year. We have some of the, the existing covers and all that stuff. We get it. We get how these things work. And so you can see this event, these devices, you can put your hands on them, the new accessories we'll talk about. And you see the sort of logical evolution that has occurred there. I mean, it's not like there's something dramatic has happened. And it's certainly not like when they first announced it, where it was, oh my God, this is so crazy. Microsoft is getting to the hardware business. This is so new and different. These devices that they announced and the accessories they announced are very clearly evolutions of, what they had done over the past year. So let's talk about what they did announce, I guess, to get to that. So which one do you want to take, Mary Jo? Do you want Surface 2 or Surface Pro 2?
yeah, I want to do the Surface 2.
Okay.
Right. So the biggest question going in, because Paul had pretty much written up all the specs in advance for the Surface 2. So we knew it was a Tegra 4 based processor. We knew it was supposed to have somewhat higher battery life. I think they're quoting now 10 hours. We had heard closer to 8 when we were first hearing about it. It's the same size. It's a 10.1-inch screen. It looks identical, except that it's silver now, which they say is the actual color of the Vapor Mag casing if you didn't paint it. So it feels, but what Paul and I both noticed is it kind of feels plasticky, but not in a bad sense of wow, it's plastic. It didn't feel like that. It was more, it felt much lighter, and it had kind of a very tactile feel, like a plasticky tactile feel. But they told us, no, it is definitely metal and not plastic. What else? It uses the same covers. You can keep using your existing Type and Touch covers with it, or you can use the new Touch 2 and Type 2 covers with the device. But you cannot use the power cover with it, right? Is that right or not right?
That's right.
I can't remember.
Wait, is that right?
Can you with Surface? You can use the power cover with Surface 2, I believe, but not with the original Surface RT. So yeah, it's pretty much an identical device with better graphics. It's supposedly much more responsive, so that you're not going to have these really long lag times when you do things like browse the web and open your mail. I liked it. I thought it seemed like a nice device, but more of an incremental upgrade than a huge upgrade. So I'm right now not thinking I would buy one, because I already have a Surface RT. But if when I do get to try it out, it's like night and day, maybe I will buy one.
I've got word from our TD extraordinaire that we have special footage from the event that happened this Monday.
All my documents, including my entire roadmap, Mary Jo, all of it, 3 years of it, Mary Jo, right here on this device. Where's Paul? Hey, dude, it's on here, all of it. Let's just pretend your arch nemesis in media had all your information and was giving it to the world on a daily basis. Let's just pretend that was happening. It's a totally fake scenario. And then let's say that on this device, you had the next 3 generations of Surface, which we do and we're designing right now. But you lost it, and it got right in the hands of the people that you might not trust with the information. I'm just saying.
I kind of resent that. They should trust us with that information.
Here's what's great. That product, it's BitLocker enabled. By the time I get on this stage and finish this, there's really no hope for Mary Jo to break into that product. But that's not what this demo is. And if you do, you can have my roadmap.
That seemed a little strange. I was not aware that happened. How did you guys take that being called out by like a professor picking on students?
Funny. I mean, but that's actually what I was sort of alluding to up front when Mary Jo was gone, was that, in the past, us publishing information about products that were coming out for the Windows team, in particular the Surface team, has been met in a very negative fashion by those folks. And they were kind of playful about it this time, which I think is the right and respectful and, the correct thing to do, because we all have a job to do, and we try to do the best that we can do and all that kind of stuff. And I've always used this example, and I've told their PR folks this, I've told people from Microsoft this, when Car and Driver publishes a spy photo of the next BMW doesn't stop advertising, it doesn't stop allowing those people to review their cars, and it doesn't stop BMW from winning the 10 best every single year for whatever number of years running it is that they tout in their own advertisements. I mean, why would you have that kind of weird adversarial relationship with the people that care most about you? And so I felt like at this event, maybe it's just temporary, but it was nice to feel like we were finally getting the correct response from these people. So it was nice.
I agree.
I thought it was kind of classy.
Yeah, I thought it was a good joke. Like we weren't quite sure what they were going to do. When I came into the event, they said, make sure you sit sort of where Panos can see you, because he wants to have you in his line of sight during the event. And I was like, oh boy, he's going to call me out for something, and he's going to say something really bad. And it wasn't. It was just part of this prank, which was good. Yeah.
It's worth mentioning too that at the original Surface event from about a year ago, at one point, he kind of launched into the audience, Panos did, and handed someone a Surface RT and gave it to them. And as he went into at that event, I was sitting across from Mary Jo in a different spot. And I was sitting there thinking, he's going right for Mary Jo. And he went right by Mary Jo and he gave it to someone, I don't know, was it right next to you or right behind you?
Yeah. He was going to give it to me, I think, and then he realized suddenly it was me, and then he stopped and went, "Oh no, I can't give it to her." And
so that was kind of funny, because I was like, "He's giving it to Mary Jo." No, he isn't.
No.
so I guess he kind of made up for it this time.
Yeah, it was good. It was all in fun, and it was a good way to show, like, yeah, we know you guys are trying to get our stuff, and this is your job as journalists. You're supposed to try to get this information, and we're supposed to try to let you not get this information. So I agree with Paul. It was like a mature response. It didn't feel like they were just calling us out and being jerks. It didn't feel like that.
No.
Yeah.
So there's also other hardware with this, apart from the being called out, becoming more popular.
Yeah, there was other stuff that happened.
Other stuff than that, yeah. Go figure. Less inside baseball. Surface Pro 2 got official. Everything does look the same.
It looks the same. And so, just to continue what Mary Jo was saying about the original Surface, it's interesting because the Surface RT always seemed very thin and light to me, and then this new one is thinner and lighter, which I didn't think they were going to do. And it does get better battery life and all that. So I'm curious to see that one. But the Surface Pro 2 has changed even less, right? It is the same body exactly. I don't recall if it's actually lighter. I wouldn't imagine it's much lighter, but it's the same exact body. And it has all the expected updates that almost anyone could have guessed. They went from the 3rd generation Ivy Bridge processor to the 4th generation Haswell processor. And so you get a little bit of performance boost there. You get a big boost in battery life. And they claimed that through some other optimization, software, hardware, et cetera, that they've gotten a 75% improvement in battery life. So 4.5 hours to about 7+ hours, depending on how you want to measure that. And so that's a big deal. It has the same 1080p display as before, which now you see in the Surface 2 as well. But it has some percentage, 46% better color reproduction, whatever, and is less glary, less reflective. So kind of an improvement there. But I think that's about it, right? I mean, they feel like the market responded to Surface RT in such a way that they needed to change it in their minds in a fairly radical way. Although, like Mary Jo said, I don't actually think Surface 2 is a radical change. But they felt like the market reception of Surface Pro was great and that they really didn't have to change much at all and just address some of the minor and obvious complaints like around battery life, which they did. And we can debate whether that assumption is correct, but that's what they did. But one of the nice things about keeping the form factor over 2 generations of devices, and this is something Apple benefits from as well, is that all of the accessories tend to work across the generations. And so these 2 devices work with all of the old accessories, of course, but now there are new accessories, and they work across most of the existing devices, not just the new ones, but also the old ones.
So there are a couple accessories actually shown off: the dock, the power cover, the car charger, wireless adapters, all this stuff. But those accessories are delayed until, well, not delayed, they're not being released until next year. Surface Pro 2 and Surface 2 were available for pre-order right away. What did you make of that?
By the way, so were a bunch of accessories, right? So Type Cover 2 and Touch Cover 2 both have backlit keys. Those are available for pre-order for either device and for the older devices, and those will become available October, 22nd?
That's right.
And what else do we have for accessories? There was a bigger list than that.
Well, the Type cover got thinner.
The wireless adapter for the typing covers, right? So you can use any of the covers away from the device. It doesn't have to be plugged directly into the device, which is the case now. I thought that was, I look at that and I think there isn't much use for this. But the truth is, when you're hunched up against the device, it can be sort of awkward. And I heard from people that want to use this with like a TV. I want to plug it into my TV and play a movie that way. If I have the keyboard, I can sit over by the couch and not be right up on top of the device, and in tandem with a wireless mouse and so forth, not a bad option. What else? I feel like there's more, though. Are we missing something here?
Well, there's that Surface Remix project that was a total separate thing. But I'm kind of curious about these new touch covers. They have like over 1,000 points that you can touch. It's supposed to be much more responsive.
Yeah.
What is your thinking behind why Microsoft moved towards over 1,000 points of touch?
Well, I think what they're going to do is finally move beyond the stuff that they produce and allow third parties to create their own, I think they call them blades. And this will enable a much wider range of possibilities. And so if you think about a keyboard in the original version of these covers, each one of those had a sensor, each one of the keys, I should say. Now there's over 1,000 keys spread over the surface of that, cover area, whatever it is. And now you can put different kind of sheaths or covers on top of it, and they can have different patterns on them and perform different functions. And so we'll see, people, I'm sure, will come up with musical keyboards like you see in a piano, or that mix cover that you were talking about that they showed off. But there'll be other, probably innovative things, I think, over time. And I think that's the point of it, to expand it out to third parties.
Okay, so when are we going to see a second screen click or clack into the Surface?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if you could put a screen on one of those things, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't add something like that. But I don't know why you would want to.
Because you want the courier to come back to life.
Right. Oh, great. Because you want that Nintendo thing.
Well, it could be a giant 3DS. Mary Jo, what did you think about the accessories of the different blades? The Surface Remix project, which I believe has like, I don't know how many points of contact it has, but I know it's built for music. It's a totally different approach for the Surface.
Yeah, definitely. So they just showed off one of what they're calling these blades, which are going to be covers that plug into the Surfaces, the Surface 2, the Surface Pro, and the Surface Pro 2. They showed this one that's a music pad, but they're looking for more ideas of different kinds of blades that they could build, and maybe other people can build if and when they release a whole SDK for these things. So the idea is it's going to be something that you would need the sensors and the pressure sensitivity of on that other cover. And then the applications after that are whatever you can imagine. And so I put out a call on my site. I'm like, what would you guys do if you were going to build a business-focused blade? Like what kinds of things? And the very first suggestion I got was somebody said, what about a Braille one? Which is kind of cool, you know, like what if they could make a Braille like cover for people who are blind, and they could actually use the Braille cover to input right into their Surface device. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But people have a lot of ideas, you know, like people are thinking about maybe you could have a solar powered blade, or you could have something that would be a blade that would recharge phones in some way. People have a whole ton of ideas already, but there isn't yet an SDK for blades. When I asked Microsoft, are you going to have one? They said, maybe, we're thinking about that. And do you think people would be interested in that? I think they would, because I think people would come up with a lot of very unusual applications where you could use a pen and or touch on that extra pad. And it's a couple of people likened it to the old Courier design. Like you'd actually have two touch screens side by side. It wouldn't look like Courier, but it would give you that effect. You'd have two different kinds of touch screens that would work together and be connected by a hinge, basically. So kind of a cool idea.
They could standardize it. I mean, there's no reason why people couldn't build these connectors into other devices too. You know, they could just kind of put it out there.
Do we get any pricing information about the dock or the new power cover? Because I can't recall that.
Yeah, they're both $200.
$200 for the dock and the power cover.
Yep.
Yikes.
The other thing that's, by the way, speaking of the dock, you know, a lot of people have been asking for that, and it doesn't work with the RT-based devices. It won't work with Surface RT or Surface 2. And I sort of didn't appreciate this until I saw one in person, but the reason for that is that it doesn't connect to the Surface from that bottom. It doesn't connect where the keyboards connect, where the covers connect. It connects on the sides. And so there are these two sort of wing things that kind of clip in on the sides. And if you're familiar with the Surfaces, you know that the sides of the Surface RT, Surface 2, and then the Surface Pro and Pro 2 have different port arrangements. And it must be driving everything through the power connector, right? That I sort of assumed that the dock would drive everything, meaning all of the external peripherals you're connecting, through that cover connector. But that's not the case. That's wide open. In fact, it's open on purpose because, of course, a lot of people will want to leave their whatever cover they have connected to it when they dock it. And that's, you know, that's how that thing works. And so I guess if I had just looked at it a little more carefully or thought about it a bit more, that might have become obvious. But it took seeing one in person to, you know, to draw that connection that the space under the Surface in the dock is open to the air, so to speak, or open to the table. And that's because they want to, you know, have you keep using the cover. But it also means that power connector on the Surface Pro and Pro 2 is perhaps a little more. There's a little more. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's all just going through USB 3. I don't know how I'm not sure how they're doing this now. Well, now that I'm talking myself through it, actually, I suppose they could just be doing DisplayPort out and USB out, and that's all they're doing. That might be it. Never mind.
$200 seems kind of steep for a dock for something like this. I mean, if you can replicate a lot of this using USB 3, why would you need the Microsoft version of the dock, other than the fact it'll hold the device very nicely?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, because I'm actually doing this right now. So the machine that I'm using right now is a Surface Pro 1, you know, the original Surface Pro, and I'm using a USB 3 docking station with it. And I'm using the mini display port out to do the display to the monitor I'm using. And looking at the device right now, what I can see are three things that need to be plugged and unplugged every time I move it. And so there's the USB 3 cable that goes to the dock. There's the power cable itself. And then there's the mini display port adapter. And so that's a little bit of a pain. And so this thing, you just kind of bring the Surface in, you know, you plug it together, and, you know, obviously the power cord is left in. There's only that one thing to do. You don't have to worry about different cables. And if you've ever done the cables on a Surface, you know, you spend all this time looking, you know, trying to get them exactly right and all that. So it's just a convenience, I would say.
I'm looking at that. There's that article that Mary Jo wrote up about the Microsoft Blades and how they had that promo video showing off bunches of different designs where they're introducing the Surface Remix, and they showed off one that looked like a wristwatch somehow that would be attached to it, or one that actually was a piano keyboard. There's been rumors of a Microsoft smartwatch. Do you think they'd come through with the Surface?
Yeah, I know. This was just a student mock-up. You know, he or she, I think it was a he, showed what if you had a blade that had this removable thing that would be like a flexible panel and you could actually wear it. So I don't think this is a precursor to if Microsoft does a smartwatch. I don't think they're showing that, but I think they're just kind of thinking about what would a wearable look like, because Microsoft has hinted very strongly they're into wearable technology.
Definitely.
Yeah, I saw people speculating. Oh, look, they're working on a watch, and it's like,
Right.
no, this is a student design. It's just to
Yeah.
put 10 college students in a room, ply them full of Doritos, and say, give us some ideas for this kind of thing, and this is what they came up with.
Microsoft's done a smartwatch. I wanted one. It was a Spot watch.
I probably still have one in my closet if you still want it, but I believe it's
The Surface
I
no
don't
longer
think
works.
Yeah, the Surface is
It's going to just be like a wristwatch, Paul. Quite the good gift, actually. It's my retirement gift. When I'm not
Nice.
guest hosting next week. It's my last week, I think, guest hosting for a while. So so no smartwatch coming. With
Well,
blades.
I think there is a smartwatch coming, but I don't think it has to do with blades necessarily. I think there definitely is some kind of Microsoft Watch and or wearable technology coming. I mean, I'm pretty sure there is.
I like the idea of it being like a peelable touchpad, and it's kind of like
Yeah,
a
it's
snap
cool.
bracelet kind of idea. And I just don't think
Yeah.
the technology is there for that yet, unless you want the thing to have a display that's about 3 millimeters by about 1 millimeter. That'd
Or
work pretty well.
the display could be all around the band. And if you think it's easy to break a smartphone screen now, just slap one of these things on your wrist and have it just explode, just by the action of doing that.
Nothing like wearable technology, wearing Surface on your sleeve or your wrist in this particular case.
That's why they call it Surface. Hmm?
Yep.
I'm just gonna let that sit there. So the audio, I'm sure right now the folks listening to this and watching this at home are laughing so hard that I had to pause. Okay, good. Now-
All right.
Okay, so we've got what about on the pricing of the Surface Pro and the Surface Pro 2 and the Surface 2?
Yeah.
The Surface RT still exists. I believe it's staying at I want to say $349. Is that right?
Yep.
That's sticking around. So we're gonna have the Surface RT, the Surface 2, the Surface Pro is
Yep.
gone. I'm assuming that's gonna be.
That's right.
Okay, so how is Microsoft positioning that kind of, I guess, not collection, but this lineup of Surface versus?
Poorly? Is that the word you're looking for?
No, I was just well, maybe they told you guys something. Maybe
No,
there's.
I mean, I have a theory. We'll talk about a Surface Mini thing a little bit later, but we all know one's coming, and I feel I said this earlier, and now that we have a little bit more information about Surface Mini, I don't think it changes anything. I feel like the Surface RT is being kept in the market as a $349 entry point until Surface Mini is ready, and that Surface Mini will then take over that price point. And that maps kind of closely to how Apple does things with the iPad, where you have an iPad Mini that's $329 to start, and a full-size iPad with Retina display that starts at $499. Those are close to Microsoft's prices, so $349 for the RT, old RT, and then $449 to start for the Surface 2, which is, higher than I think
Expensive.
people wanted. Yeah.
Too expensive. Yep.
Yep.
Even
Yep.
we heard the rumor last week it was going to be $499. So okay, at least it's $50 cheaper than we thought, but it's still really expensive. And Microsoft and its defenders will say it's still cheaper than a comparable iPad, but I think they really needed to come in way, way cheaper on this to get people to even consider it. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about the pricing. That's kind of a downer.
So, but the
Yeah.
RT will remain as the Surface RT. It's not getting rebadged. It's just Surface or Surface
Yeah.
One.
Yeah, they're just keeping it around. I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like they just have stuff left over and they're just going to sell it until it's gone. Maybe I'm misreading that, but
I want
Yeah,
my
I think
$99
that's right.
Surface.
Yeah, and then on the Surface Pro, Microsoft is going to discontinue offering that in retail stores and with its retail partners on October 22nd. But it's still going to offer the Surface Pro supposedly through its resellers. So it's not totally taking the Pro away, but it's going to really reduce the distribution on that and then just let the Surface 2 Pro be the new Pro. So that makes it a little confusing too. So you're going to have Surface RT, Surface 2, and then the Surface 2 Pro. and sort of have the Surface Pro. Why can't they do anything simple at Microsoft? I just want to throw that out there.
Can it be this Surface 365 and I get a new one when the new one comes out? I'll just pay every year. How about that? Sure. I'll take hardware as a service.
They're expensive to. Yeah, I wonder how that would look. I mean, it would be an expensive thing to replace every year, but I think that people who have a Surface Pro are in good shape going forward because the performance is there, the battery life is lacking, but you can get a power cover. Starting in January or whatever, a couple $100, not a bad way to, improve the lifetime of that device. And you can, of course, do docking now the way I'm doing it, kind of during rigged, or if you want the real thing, that will work with your device as well. RT is a little bit more of a question because, Mary Jo was just wondering, is this good enough to upgrade and all that kind of stuff? I mean, I really feel like the first RT device just doesn't have the performance to be acceptable as kind of a daily use device, especially compared to something like an iPad. I mean, no one has ever used even an iPad 2, which they still sell, and thought, wow, this thing's really slow. I don't think anyone has ever once had that thought. And there's no way that anyone that uses Surface RT doesn't have that thought on a daily basis. I mean, there's no way. It's just too slow.
Yeah.
And so $449 is it's a big price to pay to buy something that looks an awful lot like the thing you already have, that you bought just a year ago or less. But I do feel like that's a better upgrade, assuming you're okay with the other stuff that's going on, with the RT ecosystem and so forth.
Yeah. When I asked them at the launch, who do you think is still going to buy the Surface RT? Like, do you really think people are still going to buy it when they see the RT next to the Surface 2? They said they still think there's a market for it, and that they think people who aren't willing to pay $449 but would pay $349 will look at it. They said students, they think, some may look at it, or people who are very, very price sensitive. I don't know. I agree with you that, like, when you hold that up against the iPad, the performance is just not the same.
It is a tough thing to hand someone this device and say, you as a poor person, you as a student, you can use this. And then, by the way, go forth and be frustrated every day now going forward. I mean, it's really an awful thing from that perspective, from a performance.
Although, you know what, I'd throw out there, I think when they have the Windows 8.1 RT available for the Surface RT, that it's going to help it to some degree, because they've said they focused in that update for the RT on improving performance, and you're going to get the new version of IE 11. So I don't have the RTM bits obviously yet for the Surface RT with the Windows 8.1 release, but I've been running the consumer preview, and I haven't been having a great experience with IE11. I've had a lot of bugs in that, but otherwise, I do feel like it is somewhat snappier performance-wise. So I'm hoping that will definitely give it at least some degree of a boost and some advantage.
It needs it. I hope that's true.
It does. Yeah.
We didn't talk about the giant news of the fact that you can actually have 2 kickstand positions. It's official. It's supposed to be more lappable, I believe, was the lappability was one of the
lappability.
Lappability is a word apparently made up by the Microsoft team to explain how to use a Surface Pro or a Surface of the new Surface devices on a lap, because it's been a complaint that it's meant just to sit on a desk. You guys didn't get to try it out?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, to be honest, it's not just lap use, although that's going to be a big deal. I would want to hold this thing out at arm's length and type on it. And I always found the angle of the original Surface devices to be a little too severe, if you will, a little too front forward. And so that kind of lean back angle, the bigger angle, I think is going to have more uses than just sitting on your lap. And I think that was important that they did that. So I actually do think that's a big deal.
As do I, actually, because I want to use this. I want to have one device that can be a tablet, a laptop, and now a desktop with all of these accessories that are coming out for Surface. This seems like it's an actual viable contender. What should have been true a long time ago. Actually.
Yeah, I remember when I don't know if it was the October event, but Panos Panay was talking about how he uses the word perfect a lot, and he was saying, this device is perfect, and this part of the device is perfect, and the feel of this is perfect, and the click this thing makes is perfect, and the angle that this thing at is perfect. And I was like, hold on a second. First of all, there's no such thing as one angle on a device like this that's perfect for everybody. We're all different heights. Even if we're just going to use it sitting at a desk at this, same seat height and same desk height and everything, there's no such thing as one angle that's perfect. I mean, even two isn't really perfect. I'm sure the next one will have three or whatever. It'll be like one of those car seat armrests where you can, click it up in various increments and then slam it back down and start over again. I mean, I would imagine they're eventually going to get to that kind of thing.
I still don't like the idea, though, of a sharp kickstand on my legs when I'm using it in my lap. I wish they had some kind of a thing where it had a flat bottom to it, like connected to the kickstand somehow, because I think that would have made it way
or like a rubberized, rounded surface.
Yeah, something softer on your legs, right? Like even if you're not wearing shorts or whatever, like it still kind of digs in if you try to use it on your lap. I feel like, and it's also very tippy. Right.
Yeah.
I'll be curious. When you try the second position in the kickstand,
That's why you need a power cover, Mary Jo, because it weighs so much.
I know, right? Yeah. Woohoo. No,
I feel like when I use it, I don't use it on my lap, but when I've tested that, I feel like the weight of my hands on the keyboard is what keeps it there, and then if I don't type very quickly, it's going to just keep sliding, off the lap.
That's why I always say I want a Surface Book. I want something with the bottom that's like a typical laptop that has a keyboard that's actually physically attached to it.
Sure.
Because that's what you can use on your lap.
Did you guys see the Ask Me Anything with Panos Panay on Monday on Reddit, where he mentioned a Surface 2 with LTE coming next year? Now, this wasn't mentioned at all during, at least as far as I know, during Monday's press conference.
Yep.
What do you think about that news just being on Reddit?
No, that's okay. They do that kind of thing. Go ahead.
They do. And they didn't really have a press conference on Monday, which was interesting. Like they didn't let us have a public Q&A. So I'm sure somebody would have asked that question in that forum. They would have said, hey, everybody still is asking about LTE. How about it? So instead, they're trying to kind of try out all these different channels for giving out news at Microsoft. And the Surface team seems to really like using Reddit. So I guess that was their plan.
I don't mind them using Reddit for that. That's fine. No,
me neither. Yeah. So what Panos said there exactly was, we didn't talk about it today, but Surface 2 will be launching an awesome LTE SKU early next year. That's exactly what he said. And that's all they would say on it. Yeah. They wouldn't say any more.
So after 18 months of complaining, they'll finally acquiesce to this and deliver the device that we supposedly all wanted. And what they're going to find is what they knew all along, is that there's kind of a small market for that. So I sort of feel like it should be a build to order type option or something. I mean, that's not really the way they do things, but maybe they should. So they're going to make an entire SKU that just has those, capabilities. Hopefully it'll be a universal LTE and not something that's tied to individual carriers. It seems to be the way these things are going, but I don't know.
Do you guys expect this LTE-enabled tablet to be subsidized by the carriers, or do you think it's going to be one of those? Can Microsoft pull that kind of thing off with Verizon or AT&T?
They'll do both. I thought I could swear you could get a Surface at. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I could have sworn. Oh no, it was other tablets. They sell other tablets that way through like AT&T. Yeah.
And remember, people have seen Surfaces in like Verizon stores and AT&T stores, leading a lot of people to say, oh, so they're going to have these subsidized Surfaces. And that has never happened to date. So maybe that will happen.
I bet when someone does a teardown of this machine or these machines, they'll see that there is the space for that component and then in the new version.
That seems to be more like a better positioning for something like a mini tablet when you want to have that out and about. Not necessarily a large tablet. Calling the Surface a large tablet is a little bit of a stretch, but a 7-inch, 8-inch one, that seems like that's where that'll end up. But Paul, you got this story about Delta giving Surface 2s to pilots. Is this the way? I mean, is this the only way Surface 2s are going to get moved? If like, I'm just like, here you go.
You're looking at this the wrong way. I think of it more like Delta is a big company that has lots of employees. Earlier in the summer, I had been contacted by a couple of their pilots who were telling me that their flight attendants were going to get Windows phones and their pilots were going to get Windows tablets, and that both of those devices would be Nokia devices. And then a few weeks later, a month later, whatever it was, they made the announcement about the Delta flight attendants. And so I sort of casually threw out the fact that the Windows tablets were coming as well. But then I found out this week that actually now they've changed their minds. They're not going to use the Nokia tablet. They're going to use the Microsoft Surface 2 tablet, the RT one. Now, the Nokia tablet was going to be Windows RT based, assuming they don't do it, and they may. I mean, they could announce this as soon as next month. But the fact that Delta has switched from Nokia to Microsoft does kind of make me wonder a little bit whether that's a hint about the fate of that Nokia tablet.
Are you suggesting that the Nokia tablet was already killed by Microsoft's soon-to-be ownership?
Well, I'm certain that they talked about it. I don't know. I just say a lot of people were looking forward to the Nokia tablet. I'm certainly was very interested and am still very interested in their companion apps. But I mean, given that Microsoft is going to be buying this business, I really don't think that it makes sense for Nokia to release that now, because that device surely will be orphaned. Microsoft makes Surface. They're not going to sell two different kinds of RT two kinds of RT tablets that compete directly with each other from a size, form factor perspective, whatever.
Well, we're going to talk about this later on in this episode, but I think Nokia is going to launch that tablet. I think they're going to launch it on October 22nd. And I don't know, I don't really see harm in them launching it because it supposedly is going to be a Qualcomm tablet. I think it might have better specs than the Surface, but it also is supposedly going to be more expensive than the Surface, even though it's an ARM.
Yeah,
I know. Yeah, so I don't know what the positioning will be and how that'll work out, but Microsoft isn't going to close the Nokia transaction until probably early 2014. So and then once that happens, there'll be a lot of chaos and integration and all that. So I think there is time for that kind of a device to be out in the market and have people decide kind of which is the best, or even play them up as two different kinds of devices. Like one's all consumption, one's consumption / productivity. I don't know how that'll go, but I don't think Nokia is going to kill that device.
We'll have to wait and see what they come out with. It looks the leaked images. I think is the 2650 or something like that. The Nokia styling is quite nice, very different than the Microsoft hard-edged look. But we were talking about consumption on tablets. Amazon just released a whole bunch of new Kindle Fires, the HDX, and then they've revamped the Fire. And these are really low-cost devices as well, and they've got a huge universe of Amazon content. Are these devices being set up for competition?
Yeah, I mean, semi-indirectly. I would say that in the what I think of as the media tablet market, there's kind of a race to the bottom occurring on price, and Amazon is very willing to play that game. And Google is sort of getting in there with the Nexus a little bit. Those are very low-cost devices, $229 to start on the 7-inch device. They're both undercutting Apple by a wide margin, and now they're starting to outspec Apple, right? This thing has the highest end quad-core Snapdragon processor you can get. It has amazingly high resolution screens, better, or I should say, I guess, bigger PPI pixels per inch than the Retina displays that you see in the iPad, the big iPad anyway. And then, Mary Jo's got this bit about them kind of being enterprise friendly, which is the exact opposite of what I think of when I hear Amazon tablets. I mean, and I use these devices and I like them a lot, but I mean, I think of them as you read Amazon, you Kindle books, you listen to Audible books, you watch movies and TV shows. I mean, I don't think of this. I'm not going to, unless something is changing. And so I've ordered one of these. I'm very curious to get one. I've owned all of the Kindle and Kindle Fire devices, but I mean, I think of them as pure consumption devices, and their willingness to go after the enterprise suggests a broadening here, because that's certainly not been the case before.
Yeah. So let me talk about the enterprise part of this a little bit. It was really odd to see Amazon put out a separate press release talking about how enterprise ready these devices are. Like, this was a total enterprise press release. And they even cited data they say comes from Forrester, saying that the Kindle Fire is currently the second most popular tablet in the workplace in the US. I have never heard of people bringing this in as a BYOD kind of thing at work. But what they touted in their press release was they said, we're going to have WPA2 Wi-Fi support. We're going to actually let you have secure access to things like Microsoft SharePoint. They called that out in the press release for the Fire. They said we've got data encryption. We've got built-in Office Suite viewers for your Office documents like PowerPoint presentations. We do mobile device management and lots more. So this is totally a different approach for Amazon. And I did a post where I looked at, okay, here's what Windows 8.1 has on this front, which obviously is a whole lot more than that. But there are still not that many Windows 8.1 tablets in the workplace. So Microsoft can't claim to be the number 2 tablet maker with their tablets in the workplace with Windows 8.1 devices. They can't. They don't have it yet. So it's kind of interesting. It's like Amazon's coming right after Microsoft in their sweet spot, which is the enterprise. So while Microsoft's trying to tout their tablets as being consumer friendly and awesome consumption devices and great for the home, here's Amazon saying, "Hey, we're an enterprise tablet, guys, and we'd be a great BYOD device," which is just a total role reversal.
It's crazy.
I know.
Although I guess once these tablets, I mean. Historically, the Amazon tablets have always been a little bit behind from a specs department. Last year they finally went with some really high res devices, but they were never barn burners from kind of a performance perspective. And so I suppose as you move up to these kind of Retina class displays, quad core processors, lots of RAM, lots of storage, optionally LTE if you want it, all that kind of stuff. I mean, they're still doing that thing where they kind of block the Play Store stuff from happening explicitly, although, of course, people have figured out workarounds for that. It's Android. But, yeah, I mean, there's no reason it can't be, but it's Amazon. Yeah. I mean, this is the company that sends you emails about armchairs and art and lamps. And, I mean, like, they're like the Walmart of the internet. So it's kind of a strange...
It is very weird.
But the enterprise needs art and chairs. You got to sit and do something.
I understand, but it's like if you go to Costco and Costco would probably sells like cards so you can get Office 365, but what they don't sell, maybe they do sell. I don't know. I don't go to Costco a lot, but it'd be like buying like Windows Server cals at Costco. I got to go get some pudding and a fish and some Windows Server cals. It's just a weird combination of things,
Yep.
What's throwing me off is that Jeff Bezos has said in the past that the Fire devices are not about making money on the hardware. It's about selling services to the customers. That's where Amazon makes the money. It's about when people use the device is when Amazon is really seeing returns. Yeah. And the low prices on the HDX and the other Fire out there don't seem to say, hey, Amazon's making a ton of money, if anything, on these devices, and they historically haven't made a profit when it comes to, or it's not a profitable device by itself.
But it doesn't need to be, because unlike Apple or Microsoft or Google, they do make money on everything else, and they make money by keeping you in their little ecosystem. It's like Toys R Us used to sell Pampers at a loss to get mothers with babies into the store, and then the kid would grab stuff off the shelf, and she's there, so she's going to shop with the kids and buy other stuff. And I wrote an article about the very quote that you're talking about some time ago. I think he said that at the launch of the last Kindle Fires last fall. And it occurred to me that Amazon could win from sort of a content perspective and thus win overall, because they make software that runs on basically all of the devices. I mean, you can pick out individual Amazon services that maybe aren't on the Windows Phone or aren't over here or whatever. But if you buy an iOS device, if you buy an Android device, not a Kindle, but a Google device or Samsung, whatever, Microsoft Windows, of course, all those Amazon services are basically available everywhere. And they can win without winning in hardware, which makes sense because, again, hardware is kind of like this race to the bottom. And by selling devices at a loss, as we assume they are, or with almost no profit, Amazon is forcing other makers of hardware to follow them down that path, but they're not going to make money on services. So it's kind of an ingenious competitive thing to do, because it's forcing their competitors to lower their own prices on hardware, which is how those companies make money on those devices. And so they're in a very interesting position. And they sell art and chairs and lamps and Pampers, whatever. I'm sure they sell everything. Lawn shears.
That's true.
Lawn mowers.
I've got
Do they
recommendations.
sell cars? They should sell cars.
I believe Nissan is one of the first companies to have their cars available on Amazon, unless that story was from The Onion in my RSS reader. I'm
And
pretty
then
sure it was a real
what they could do is you could go to Amazon.com/trade-in and trade in your car, and then you could get like all this money in Amazon credit, which you would then spend on armchairs and lamps and fish, whatever.
You buy fish in bulk much, do you?
No. Well, I do live in Boston, but
Well, that story was real. Nissan is selling cars through Amazon.
Are they?
Yeah. Okay. That's probably.
I'm just gonna keep adding money to my Amazon account until I have enough to buy a Nissan.
So we've got a new Windows roadmap. We've got a lot of stuff coming up in 2014. We've mentioned that Surface Mini, but there's like software stuff that Microsoft does. Do you remember that? They used to do that. What's going on with this roadmap, which I heard, Mary Jo, you had your hands on for about a second, according to, at least for the Surface.
Sadly, I did not crack Panos's Surface, but I did get some information on the roadmap, but not from his Surface. I should be clear about that. So this is very interesting. This is from sources of mine who asked not to be named, and this is interesting for a few reasons. So there's 3 things supposedly that Microsoft is going to deliver in the spring of 2014. However, that category of time is defined. There's going to be the Surface Mini that we've heard about, which is a 7 to 8 inch tablet that will be based on ARM that will run Windows RT. There's going to be this new update to Windows 8.1 called the GDR Spring 24 update. So GDR stands for General Distribution Release, and that's what the Windows Phone team calls their incremental updates, like the ones they've been making this year. They're working on their 3rd one right now, GDR3. And this implies that Microsoft is getting in that same groove where they'll do these more incremental updates, possibly going forward to Windows, and maybe call them GDRs so that it's more symmetrical, or at least more in alignment with what Windows Phone is doing. And then there's Windows Phone Blue, which is the next big release of Windows Phone. So supposedly all 3 of these things are lining up to come out together in the spring of 2014. Now, we were talking before about the idea of an LTE-based Surface. Well, the other thing also coming in spring is the LTE-based Surface. So what we're not clear about is the LTE-based Surface the Surface Mini? Like some people are speculating that could be the case, but we don't know if that is actually a different SKU or if that is the Mini. So what's kind of compelling to me in hearing that all these things are aligning is we've been hearing Microsoft's trying to get their platforms more in alignment, right? That Windows Phone is actually going to become more and more like the Windows Phone OS, I should say, is becoming more and more like Windows RT, and that they're not just going to have this common NT-based core, but they're going to have more of the same APIs and more of the same programming interfaces and frameworks, so that if you're a developer, it in theory will be easier for you to just take the code base that you have if you develop either for the PC or tablet or your phone and just bring those apps right over much more quickly. And we know Microsoft's doing that with developer tools, and they're really kind of aligning everything that way. So I think this could be the spring 2014 watershed thing might be where you see everything align and they all come together. Right now, in fact, a breaking news item I see over on The Verge, they're saying Microsoft is going to have one single store for the Windows Phone and for Windows, and that they actually are talking about this today at their company meeting. I've been pinging people while we've been on the podcast, and I hear, yep, that is something they demoed at the show, at their at their company meeting, and they are going to have this one app store across the phone and Windows, and supposedly it's going to be in the next version of Windows. So what I think that means is it's going to be in this Windows 8.1 GDR spring thing. That's what I think we're going to see the common store.
Run Windows Phone apps in Windows.
That would be good, right?
Yeah. I mean, what would be the point otherwise?
I don't know. Right. What would be
definitely beef up RT if you could get Windows Phone apps in RT or the other way around.
Oh,
Because
big
that,
time.
the biggest
By the way, that would almost put it over the top for me right there. I mean, because there are a tremendous number of Windows Phone apps that would be very useful in our team, of many games especially.
And especially the way Windows does tiling, it just screams, "Hey, yeah, you could run these mobile apps on a desktop, and it would look right." It's not like it would look like a foreign concept with all the touch panels and all the touch-enabled devices out there for Windows 8.1 or Windows 8 and lower. That seems like this merging has to happen. My real question is, do you think Meyerson can get that really together that early? We're talking about what? We're talking about second quarter of 2014, or are we talking about?
Yeah,
it says spring.
So
right?
I no, but I do think that this is very possible and something that can absolutely happen in the next year. In fact, I've heard from more than one source that the Windows team is in effect treading water right now because of all of this reorg craziness, and they're not sure what's going on, and that this is throwing the next release, what would have been like Windows 8.2, into kind of a spin, which may explain this GDR stuff as well as kind of a holding pattern thing to do. But there is absolutely no technical reason why Windows RT and Windows 8, for that matter, couldn't run Windows Phone apps right now. That would be very easy technically. And the very notion of one store for these two things is semi-ludicrous, because there is already only one store. It's the same back end. They just tailor it to the device and to the types of apps that you would want to run. So I actually think that if they're showing a store that shows you Windows Phone apps, or is the same store as they're calling it, that this does imply that that's coming within, so let's say, the next year or whatever.
I think it's going to come sooner than a year, even though they are in chaos. I mean, they just had this reorg, right? And now they're looking for a new CEO. And Microsoft is basically in chaos. Let's just say it. But I think they're in chaos for the good, because I think they finally are getting the let out, and they're saying, guys, we can't just say, let's do this in a year. We have to do this now, because if we don't, we're going to fall behind. And why not lead instead of follow for a change with what we're doing? And let's do this. Let's have one store. Let's have one API, and let's bootstrap ourselves by being able to have more apps in the store. People keep dinging us for not having enough apps on our phones and on Windows. What if you combine the two sets of apps that you have? Then suddenly,
I really do feel like that solves RT's problems. They don't go away, but they become. It becomes a lot less laughable right there. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if this,
I think,
as you were saying, Mary Jo, I wonder if this chaotic nature of what's going on with Microsoft is actually allowing it to be more nimble to do this, because there's this, everyone's busy.
Used the term chaos for good. Is that how she said it?
And the chaos for the good.
Yeah.
Kind of like chaotic good instead of like chaotic evil,
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe that's what they need every now and then, is just a complete
chaos.
add chaos to Microsoft.
Someone to turn the blender on for a second and wake everybody up.
And there you go. Microsoft, and it's like everyone's busy working as opposed to like political infighting.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, I have complained a lot about the kind of deadwood factor at Microsoft. There's way too many employees sitting around doing nothing all the time. If you think everything's changing and there could be problems and maybe they are going to start laying off people, maybe you start working a little harder. There is something good to be said about that. So maybe that is what is happening. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is strongest when they're the underdog. That's always been the thing about them, and I think it's still true to this day. When everything is going great and they're the monopolist and they're in charge, they get kind of lazy, I think. And when they suddenly
5.5
right,
for
and then
10
when they
years.
panic, right? When they panic and they go, "Oh man, like we're in big trouble here," that's when they do their best work. And so let's hope this is that happening.
Yeah,
this is enlightening. Just got to make sure that Microsoft goes through a chaotic reorg every now and then.
You just got to make sure they're always screwed, and then everything will be fine.
When their backs against the walls, new things happen. Okay, so we've got a lot of that stuff. What about the Xbox operating system? I mean, that's supposed to have. It's supposed to be actually like 3 operating systems. There's a Windows thing in there. There's an Xbox.
Oh,
the third one I keep forgetting.
That is such. That is. That's Xbox runs Windows. Period. This whole notion is so ludicrous. The reason I say that is it's obviously they have this thing they call Xbox OS, which is highly tailored for games and all that kind of stuff. But in the past, Xbox OS was essentially, I'm oversimplifying, but kind of like a single tasking kind of a thing. It was designed to let the hardware run at the maximum possible speed, do one thing right, play games. The Xbox One is a different kind of machine. It can do multiple things at the same time. You can get Skype conversations going while you're playing a game. You can get notifications for other stuff, and it doesn't interrupt the game. You can leave the game running and do something over here. It's Windows that's making this happen. It's Hyper-V. It's Windows. Dave Cutler was working.
Hyper-V is what lets you switch between the different environments, right?
Yeah.
That's why they call it 3 operating systems in one.
Sure.
It's like the middle one is Hyper-V, right?
But Hyper-V is Windows. I mean, it's Windows.
It is. Yeah.
But
So why we're talking about Xbox One is the other part of this whole roadmap thing is, okay, we just talked about spring 2014, right? So what's Microsoft doing now, right? Okay, like what about the next few months? And what I've been hearing from people I've been talking to is there are 3 priorities for Microsoft in the next few months. One is finishing the Xbox One operating system because it is not finished yet. And they're going to launch in November. So this is another advantage of having this one operating systems division now under Terry Myerson. They can take people from the Windows team and they can move them over to Xbox and say, hey, can you help us finish this up, guys? We need to do some fit and finish here. We need to finish up a couple, whatever, last bits of the OS. I don't know what they are, but that's what they're doing. They're taking the Windows people, some of them, and putting them on Xbox One and finishing it. Okay, so that's one priority. Second, obviously, is getting Windows 8.1 out and making it generally available. And as Paul's been writing and mentioned on Twitter this week, they're not done with that operating system either, even though it's considered RTM, right? They still are going to be making updates to the built-in apps. They're going to make some updates to the final code, probably some driver updates, and they're going to be pushing that out in some form to the OEMs and to users who have the RTM bits by October 18th. The third thing is they have to finish Windows Phone GDR3, which we mentioned before. So that's the update to Windows Phone 8 operating system that adds the 1080p support to it and also does things like supports 5 and 6-inch devices. So Nokia needs that because they're going to announce supposedly this codename Bandit phablet that's, I think, 6-inch screen or 5-inch screen. So they need GDR3 to do this product. So those are the 3 things Terry Myerson's group has to do in the next few months. And then they have to go on and do the spring updates and all that. So they have a very, very full plate. They're not just sitting around waiting for spring update. They have to do a bunch of things before that too. So it's worth remembering that they're not just sitting around, guys. They're doing stuff over there. They're busy with Windows.
They're actually doing stuff. Making operating systems, getting it out on time. What an idea.
Yeah, what a concept.
So we've got a question. Paul's story here says, can Microsoft be both in devices and services? I'm going to say your answer would be no.
Well, I'm just suggesting that change is occurring at Microsoft. There's going to be a new CEO. There's been calls recently that, maybe Bill Gates should leave Microsoft. And I actually think that's a tremendous idea because one of the problems with Microsoft is I think all of their decisions are made through kind of a Bill Gates lens. What would Bill do? And, oh, actually, Bill's here. Let's ask him what he would do, and that they can't really move forward without worrying about offending his sensibilities or the types of things that, the decisions that he might have made. And anyway, I'm worried that when some CEO does come in, they'll be constrained, that the edict will be, look, we are now a devices and services company. And the reason we are that company is because we say we are, not because we actually make devices or services that anyone wants. And you need to fit what you're doing into that little scheme. And I guess what I'm saying is that Microsoft is the world's biggest and arguably best maker of software, and that they need to focus on that, not on devices. And you can make this argument, and I do, that services are simply a new way of delivering and maintaining and updating software. Fine. So the services part of it makes some sense. But I don't actually believe that they've ever been successful making hardware. I don't think their, keyboard, mouse, peripheral business needs to be part of this conversation. Obviously, that's hardware. It's fine. I'm sure that makes money or whatever. It doesn't even really matter. But it's not a very big business.
You're telling me
But when
the
you look
Arc
at-
mouse isn't the leader in hardware for Microsoft?
It better not
Touch
be.
Arc one.
I'm saying it's an accounting round-off error. I don't think it's a big thing for Microsoft. But, when you look at stuff like the Xbox, which everyone seems to think is the biggest deal in the world, despite the fact that it has a very tiny market, compared to things like smartphones, PCs, tablets, it is a tiny market compared to servers. I mean, it's just not a big market. Or if you look at things like Surface, which so far hasn't gone very well, I don't really think they have they're not that company. Microsoft is so busy trying to be this vertically integrated Apple-style company that it's almost like no one ever paused to remember that they're not good at that, and that their biggest strength is in fact software, and that if you want to just put it in sort of a historical perspective, that's how they started. Before Microsoft got MS-DOS and became the OS company, they had development tools in the very beginning, application software eventually. They even did a little bit of hardware tinkering in the early days for the Apple stuff, but their point was we will support whatever platforms are popular. We sort of forget that because for the past 20 years, or let's say 20 years, the most popular software platform by far was Windows. And so they sort of became like the Windows company. But the world's changing, and Windows is now going to be part of this much bigger picture. And I think that they need to focus on getting their software and services on those other platforms, as well as doing Windows, of course. And what I think the canonical example, the big example we have here is Office. Office is Microsoft's biggest business. You cannot get a full featured version of Office on Android or iOS today, and that doesn't make any sense. There are, I think the figure was 700 million people using iOS. At least 200 million of those are probably using iPads. There are, I think, 1 billion people using Android devices, and let's say a couple of 100 million people using Android tablets, whatever that figure is. Those markets are all significantly bigger than the market for Mac OS X, which Microsoft does make a version of Office for. And I think it's time to change that. And I think it's hard for Microsoft to make that move because they're so concerned still with this other stuff, I just think there's too much emphasis on something that they just haven't ever done well at. And I hope that whoever comes in changes that.
I think your argument's interesting because you're making the exact same argument that a number of Wall Street analysts are making right now. They are the ones, especially ValueAct, who's about to take a seat on the Microsoft board, most likely. They don't think Microsoft should be in consumer and/or consumer hardware. They think it's diluting them and not playing to their strengths. They also think consumer hardware is super low margin. And, the reason so many people originally were bullish about Microsoft and on the investment side was because they were doing software, and the margins on software are unbelievable, right? It's not like you're building a physical device and having to spend for plant and distribution and all that software. You write some code and it's a whole different model for how you distribute and how the kind of money you could make off of building software. So it's funny. Paul wrote this editorial about why he thought they shouldn't be in this. And I wrote one without knowing he was writing one, but from a different perspective, but kind of coming to the same conclusion. My editorial, which ran on Redmond Magazine, where I do a column, I said, I don't think they can pull off this one Microsoft thing the way they've described it. And the reason for me is a little bit different from your reason, Paul. It's I feel like Microsoft's trying to do two things that are at cross purposes, right? So their argument as to why they need to be in hardware and consumer is they need to do what Apple and Google are doing, right? They're vertically integrated.
That's such a
non-argument.
That's so crazy.
And they're making walled gardens, and we need to make a walled garden, and we need to be doing the whole stack top to bottom. Okay. If you buy into that, the other part of Microsoft's argument is crazy. At the same time as they're doing the vertical integration, they are saying they could still be a horizontal player. So they're saying we're still going to do Office for other devices like Android and iOS, and we're going to have Bing run on multiple platforms. So they're almost like negating their own argument by saying, yeah, we want to be a walled garden, but we're going to keep supporting every device. Right.
This is my
point. Which one do you want to be, A or B?
They're playing roulette, and they're going to play black and red.
Yeah.
You know, because you never know. It could be either one that takes off.
Yeah.
We earlier talked about this notion of the race to the bottom with pricing and how Amazon plays a big role in that. And, you know, right at the time that this is happening, right? If you think about the life cycle, the lifetime of the PC from Windows 3.0 to today, exactly 20 years, you've got this kind of bell curve of sales and also actually of average selling price of computers. For a while, those things, well, actually, no, that's more of a downward trend, I guess. You know, started very high and they go down. The netbook really kicked it in the butt and sent it flying down to the bottom. It took a long time to get to that point, but that point is happening much more quickly with new markets for smartphones and for these new tablets, where they start off very expensive, but they drop down in price like immediately, very quickly. And right as this is happening, Microsoft decides we're going to get in the hardware business. And we're going to make these devices that are not quite tablets and they're not quite PCs. And we're going to price them as expensively as we can, and no one's going to buy them. And then next year we're going to do it again. You know, and it's sort of like a great example of bad timing, wrong market, wrong thrust for the company. That's not what they should be doing. They made great devices. I mean, they're really well made. No one would look at a Surface and come away with anything other than these are really high quality. The question is whether they address any actual need or any mass market of people, and whether, like Mary Jo said, they can be made inexpensively enough to, but still make a profit. And I just don't. These things are so ephemeral now. You know, the smartphone business is changing to a model where people are replacing their phone every single year. The hardware doesn't matter anymore. You know, we're always going to have something new to talk about. You know, software subscriptions are a beautiful model for Microsoft because it gives them that steady income that they've always so wanted so desperately. Not that big hit once every 3 years when a monolithic new update would come out, but steady income. And so they can do that, and they can spread it out over multiple platforms, you know, multiple device types. I really feel like they're not playing to their strengths. Well, they're so jealous of Apple, you know.
To play devil's advocate on this, if Microsoft doesn't go out and put out hardware that's running Windows, and it's seeing a lot of its device manufacturer partners, these guys who are going over to Android and deciding, you know what, we can make a skin on top of Android that makes it operate to a point where we like it, or Chrome OS gaining a lot more manufacturers. If Microsoft doesn't put their money where their mouth is, saying this operating system is the long-term thing, and they don't have the hardware partner to show what hardware should be, isn't that a problem?
But it doesn't help them to do that, because all it does is further highlight the problems that they have with Windows. The problem with Windows is its licensing cost. You know, the reason that PC makers had to put crapware on PCs in the early days, and still do, and now are starting to look at Chrome OS on PCs, or are now looking at Android on devices, is because one of the biggest significant costs of those devices to the PC makers is a Windows license. They're pricing that too expensively. Microsoft doesn't charge itself for Windows when it makes Surface, right? I mean, do you think there's an accounting charge that goes between the divisions at Microsoft to pay for Windows? It's
kind of
technically possible, I suppose, but they're certainly not charging themselves, if you will, what they're charging Dell or HP or whoever else. I mean, I don't think that they can allow OEMs to do to Windows what they're doing to Android. But I think there's a compelling case to be made for the fact that Windows can be a purer thing, can still have the advantage of being on multiple device types, giving consumers choice, but that it could be less expensive and that you can sell more of it as a result.
Yeah,
there's also... Go ahead.
Sorry, Paul. I was going to say, you know, like, I think part of your argument and an interesting question is, would Microsoft ever look at their hardware as a loss leader, right?
Yeah.
And when I've asked that question, they've said, no, absolutely not. We are trying to earn money on this hardware. But if you look at what Amazon's doing, like the pricing on those new Kindle Fire HDs, it's really low, right? And
it's crazy.
I forget exactly what it is, but you know, Microsoft's not in that game right now. They're not trying to use hardware as the leader for getting you to subscribe to their devices. And that's what, if you are going to be in hardware, that's kind of what you need to do, I think. Because all the money for them really is in devices and software still, and it's not in hardware. And I don't know if they ever could make their hardware successful enough that it actually becomes a profit center instead of a loss center.
Yeah, that's
Like,
I would argue that even if they had to give Windows away for completely free, it would still make sense for them because they have now created this ecosystem around Windows of services that they can charge for on whether it's volume licensing to enterprises for all those enterprise services, or whether it's the consumer-oriented services that they have like Xbox Live and SkyDrive with extra storage and all that kind of stuff. Outlook 365, I'm sorry, Office 365, Home Premium, whatever it is. I mean, they're not addressing the fact that the world has changed. You know, the PC model, you would buy a copy if you ever bought it. I don't think many people did this, but you could go to a Best Buy in the 1990s or 2000s and buy a copy of some version of Office and pay hundreds of dollars for it and do that once every 5 years. Or a version of Photoshop, which was probably several $100s at the time. And then you would bring it home on some kind of disk and install it on your computer and never stop using it because it was so expensive. People pay $1 for apps now on mobile devices. They pay $7 for a really good game. You know, an Xbox 360 game is $60. This is old model, new model. You know, and the problem is they're going to get pushed out of the volume part of the market because they're still doing things the old-fashioned way when it comes to getting these platforms out into the world. And so if they want to play in the volume world of the future, they need to start lowering the prices on the software and selling more of it, you know. And they just don't seem capable of making that jump.
So instead of like making their own hardware, they could have had like a designated hardware buddy, like Nokia for a while.
Yeah, if only. Sure.
What is Nokia up to next month anyway? So they're supposed to, the rumored 6 devices, the phablets called Bandit, which rhymes, and I don't know, maybe that's why it's called Bandit. What are we really expecting from this event next month?
So this is Nokia World, which they used to do pretty consistently, I think at least every year. And then last year they didn't have a Nokia World, but they're bringing it back. They're going to have it in Abu Dhabi this year, which is kind of wild. It's going to be on October 22nd, which happens to be the day that the Surface 2 goes on sale. Same day is when Nokia World is. And rumor, courtesy of The Verge, is 6 different devices are going to be announced by Nokia there. So yeah, the Sirius tablet's got to be one of them, the ARM-based tablet, I would think. The Bandit phablet. Then there's talk about something called the Lumia 929, which I've seen people posting renders of that make it look like a slightly smaller phablet, maybe a 5-inch instead of a 6-inch. And rumor is that could be available on Verizon as one of the carriers, which would be very interesting because Verizon's always so late getting Nokia devices. And now I'm seeing their EvLeaks, who's a famous leaker of photo images, especially on the web, is saying there's something called Nokia Glee, which could be a music-focused Lumia. Maybe that will be one of the devices too. So yeah, if this pans out to be true, Nokia may drop a whole ton of new devices at that point. Now we should note that could be the launch of these devices and not actually the availability of these devices, because from other reports I've seen on WP Central and other sites, it sounds like that Bandit phablet's not expected to come to market until I think the second week of November. So it just because they're going to announce them, if they do announce them at Nokia World, it doesn't mean they're going to be available that day. But November, if it's like around November 8th, like I think is the date I saw Bandit about, that would be pretty good. If you announce them on October 22nd and they ship on the 8th, that wouldn't be much of a lag. So yeah, it sounds like it could be a pretty big product unveiling for them if all these rumors are correct.
These things just, I'm just curious about these devices and their actual future. So they come out now, Microsoft buys it. Like what's the, are they like lame duck devices at this point? I doubt that Microsoft's not going to support these things in the future. It just seems like,
I wonder about this too. Although, you know, I love Windows Phone, period. I mean, no caveats. I love the Lumia devices. The 1020, I feel, is like the greatest smartphone ever made. It certainly has the best camera in a smartphone. The Lumia 520 is that really low end device. It's $99. It's such an awesome, versatile thing to have. Second phone, kid's phone, media device, free GPS, whatever. And I think, these things, I mean, should they be considered, orphaned or lame duck or anything? I mean, should people have qualms about buying these things now because, Nokia's being sold to Microsoft? And, I don't think so. I do feel like Nokia maybe makes too many phones all of a sudden, which is kind of a strange complaint. But it's too bad that they have to make these strange variants for all of their carriers. Just to use the simplest example, there's a 520 and a 521. 520 in the United States is on AT&T, and the 521 is on T-Mobile. And these devices are almost identical componentry-wise and everything else. They're basically the same innards. The big difference is that obviously the T-Mobile one has a different different antenna inside, different radio. But they're slightly different sizes. Like they're not the same, they're not the same form factor. So on the 520, you can take off the case and you can replace it with different color cases. There's like black, white, yellow, and red, I think. And on the 521, they don't. The back comes off, but T-Mobile doesn't sell color cases, and the color cases from the 520 won't work because they're slightly different devices. And I just find that to be kind of strange. It seems like if they're going to make variants for other carriers, they should retain the shape and everything, so that if there are those kinds of accessories, at least that stuff will work across them, and there'll be some kind of compatibility like it. But instead, you get this weirdness where very similar devices, different names. It was kind of like Ford, Mercury, Lincoln, or on the GM side, Chevy. It was probably worse than GM, actually. It's probably more like GM. So it was, Chevy, Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Saturn for a little while. I'm losing some of them. Cadillac. There was a lot more. There's more, but you get the idea. It's like same platform, same device, a little off. I feel like maybe one of the things Microsoft could bring to this is a little bit more logic and a little more streamlining maybe of the lineups.
I wonder if that's just a side effect of dealing with all the carriers, because Nokia had
I'm sure it is.
Had some issues with that, and they were like, "Yeah, we promise you exclusive. So you get the 520, you get the 521, you get the 925, you get the 925. That way, they are still exclusive."
It's all so
silly.
dumb. It's so dumb.
I just think it's simple business.
Yeah.
Yep. You've got Nokia's. They own 90% of the Windows Phone market. Small market to own, but 90%. 89. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, every month we get this usage share data from AdDuplex, and it's really valuable. It's very interesting. A lot of good information. 9 of the top 10 Windows phones, meaning not sales, but in use, are Nokia devices worldwide. And I think it's 89-something% of those devices in use are Lumias, they're Nokia devices. I mean, it's we always talk like, 80%, and it's like, it's 90%, it's very interesting. So yeah, number one with a bullet there is that $99 device, the race to the bottom, right? Like, not surprising in a way that this device has only been out for a couple months and it's already number one, and by a wide margin.
Well, do you think Microsoft and Nokia and everybody can appeal to the BlackBerry faithful who are wondering what's going to happen with their company?
Are there any BlackBerry faithful? Do these people exist?
Yes, there are. No, I hear from them all the time. There are.
I would hope so, because obviously BlackBerry spoke very strongly to the enterprise market and to governments. And this is the place that Windows Phone should have been in from day one, and kind of wasn't actually in the first gen. And they made a more compelling case with Windows Phone 8. Yeah, I mean, I would hope so, but I don't know anything about that, but I would hope so. Yeah.
Should we talk about Apple? Or just take listener questions and answers.
Let's take listener
questions. We got so many, right?
Yeah, we got plenty of them. So let's get to them, because there's lots and lots of questions. I asked on Twitter if you guys had questions, and if you got questions in the chat room, feel free to let us know right now. But a question was, ask Paul, this is about the Kindle HDX. What do you think of the Mayday remote help feature? Looks really cool and unique.
This is coincidental, and I mean that to the announcement of the HDX devices. But I just this past week handed off my previous generation Kindle Fire HDs to my parents. And so my mother, who has very bad eyesight, got the 8.9-inch one, and my dad got the 7-inch version. And they are the target audience for that button, you know, and so it's not in the devices they have, although I would imagine the software will probably be upgradable to that. It's so weird because it's Android, right? But the people who would tend toward Android, the technical types that love the fact that it's open source and you can, look at the source code if you want to, or you can do whatever you want to it. It's the Wild West. Is the exact opposite, the exact polar opposite of the people who need a Mayday button in software because they need the Amazon ferry to come flying down and help them with some purchase or whatever that thing is for. So I think it's silly, but I think it speaks to the mass audience that device targets.
Yeah, if you guys don't know about the Mayday feature, there's a function on the new Kindle Fire devices where you can hit this Mayday button.
It's not a physical button.
Well, sorry, it's just
no, I know, but I mean,
it
sounds like one. I mean, I saw that and I looked because I'm thinking, tell me, please, God, there isn't a red button on this thing or something, but
it's
actually
button.
in soft.
Yeah, so once you hit the soft button, a window shows up with a tech support person who can draw on your tablet to tell you, oh yeah, you just hit this point over here, or they can actually interact with the UI themselves to show you how to do stuff.
This is OnStar for tablets.
24/7 too. And there doesn't seem to be an extra charge for it, as far as I know.
Like I would just bother them at 3 o'clock in the morning and be like, I actually don't need any help. I just wanted to talk to somebody.
How awesome would have this been on Windows 8? Guys, would this have been on Windows 8?
They would never. Could you imagine?
That would be the live tile. Live tile with, with somebody inside of it all the time going like, I'll just get that for you.
They would need it would be a gag like on the IT Crowd where they have to say, the guy answers the phone. He says, if you try turning it off and turning it on, like the Windows phone, the Windows 8 guys would have needed a line like that, Did you try moving the mouse into the lower left corner? Oh, yeah, there it is.
Okay, so we've got this simple question. We've probably covered it already. What are the chances that Windows Phone and RT converge without breaking app compatibility again?
Well, I just posted about the single store idea here. And so, what Microsoft has said is they're trying to do one Windows, right? They're trying to create one Windows API, and that Windows API is WinRT, not Windows RT, WinRT, right? So if you think that through, it means there is going to be a convergence to some degree, right? There's going to be one API, common set of developer tools. They're still going to look different. I believe you'll still have to have the UI layer look different on your phone than it looks on the tablet. I mean, you'll have a lot of commonalities, but it doesn't scale down. You can't just take the phone UI and throw that on a tablet. It doesn't work like that. So I think it is going to converge. And what I added to my report is supposedly there's a Windows Azure connection to this whole one store thing. And if you remember what they did with Windows Phone 7 and Windows Phone 8, Microsoft actually compiled people's apps for them, the developers' apps for them in the cloud to try to help with app portability. So if this is what the Azure connection is here, maybe Microsoft's going to help developers and say, hey, if you want to put your application that you built for the phone on your tablet, we'll compile it for you in the cloud. And then we'll get it in the store for you. And this will help you with your performance and will take a lot of the hassle out of actually trying to get your apps to run across the different platforms. So that I don't know that for a fact, but I've heard there is an Azure piece to this whole scenario, and that could be what it is.
Rich asks, why is this show the only show on Twitter that seems to carry a level of shame in covering its topic?
That's a terrible question.
We chatted with him offline about this.
Yeah, I will. All right, so to semi-seriously answer this question, the one thing I will say, and I've said this before, is that in the same way. Well, no, let me rephrase this. It would be nice in a way to be one of those kind of Apple-loving bloggers. Nothing ever goes wrong in Cupertino, and everything they shovel at us is exactly what we need at that given moment. The utter certainty of such an existence would be, pleasant in some ways, right? I mean, the problem is I think we have too much integrity to look at what's happening in our world to behave anything but logically toward what we see. And so some of the stuff we see from Microsoft is absurd. Some of it is disappointing. Some of it is genuinely great. And I think that we just approach it from a position of honesty regardless. And, I think to the kind of partisan online crowd that is looking for pro Microsoft from us or pro Google from whoever or pro Apple from those guys. It's confusing that we're not like that. But, Mary Jo and I shouldn't speak for Mary Jo, but we're not cheerleaders. We're not here to, sis boom ba for Microsoft. We're here to tell you the truth.
Yeah. And, even Microsoft knows this, and I think they appreciate us for it. They tweeted one time from the Windows account, which is a huge account on Twitter for them. They said, thanks for the Windows Weekly podcast. We love it. And they did the hashtag tough love. So they know that we want them to be better. Like, that's why we're critical. It's not because we hate them.
Right. Exactly.
We're not doing this to spite them.
If my kid comes home from school with all C's and D's on his report card, actually, I should mention it's 2013. They don't have C's and D's anymore. But if they come home with whatever they have now that is the equivalent of C's and D's, I don't just say, well, it's okay because I love you, so don't worry about it. No, I want that kid to try harder. I want that kid to perform to their potential.
Well, yeah, Paul's kid did a lot of cease and desist letters. I'm very aware of that.
We've gotten those too.
Pete asks, what do you guys think of the SteamOS announcement that happened this week? You got Valve having a Linux-based operating system, and it looks like they're gunning after Microsoft a bit.
I know Mary Jo wants to dive right into this one.
I do. I'm like, Steam?
So, right, I was going to say, I don't know if we have a soundboard of a cricket chirping, but I would say that when you are a hammer, everything's a nail. And I think the simple fact is that when you look at the gaming market, PC gaming is the smallest portion of that, and Steam is in PC gaming. And of course, they want to expand their market out. And so Windows isn't free. And so they're going to make this Linux thing that runs on set-top boxes and on TVs and all that kind of stuff. And they'll port their games to run on Linux / this SteamOS thing. That makes sense for Steam. It's logical for them to want to do that. The question is whether that makes sense for customers. And I don't think it does. I don't think there's a mass market of people that want the thing that they're describing. I think that market is already well served by Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft on consoles, and that even those are tiny markets compared to the number of people playing games on Facebook, on the web, on mobile devices like smartphones and iPads and Android tablets, and that thing that they're describing is just not particularly interesting, to the wider world.
Shall we go on to the picks and tips of the week?
Sure.
That's a yes, resounding yes. The crickets, I didn't have the crickets this time, Alex?
No crickets.
You could have had it. Could have had it all, but we're going to have to go to the picks of the week. So we got a tip of the week. What do you got, Paul?
Well, in thinking about the prices of the Surface 2, Surface Pro 2, which I think we all agree are a little too expensive, I was thinking about ways in which you could overcome that. And of course, one of the easy ones would be to trade in your old devices. And so I wrote an article about that, was just focused on one thing, because Microsoft has a couple of different promotions where you can trade in devices to them, in some cases specific devices. And if for the current Windows Store offer, for example, they'll give you up to $200 for an old iPad down to iPad 2. And actually $200 for an iPad 2 is a pretty good deal. And you can use that toward the purchase of a new device. And so suddenly a $449 Surface 2 becomes a $249 Surface 2 if you have an iPad to trade in. But as many people were commenting to the article and to me via email, which I already know because I actually engage in this kind of stuff myself, you actually have lots of options for trading in electronics. And actually, we're talking about commoditization of hardware and the rapid release cycle that we're seeing around there. It may make sense to do that. And so if you like to stay up to date on gadgets, I mean, there's no reason to not, as soon as possible when you have upgraded or about to upgrade, to trade in your existing products somewhere. So Amazon does this. If you go to amazon.com/trade-in, they have a great site that will give you Amazon credit, which if you spend a lot of time and money on Amazon like I do, is pretty much as good as money. But there are sites like Gazelle and others that do this. I think Newegg has something very similar. And of course, you can sell stuff on eBay if you want to go through that process as well. And that often can garner you more money than doing a trade, if you just sell it outright. But just wanted to remind people, because some of these devices are expensive, that there are options. And I mean, hopefully nobody has as many devices. I can see 20 or 25, sellable devices from where I sit. But Hopefully you don't have that many, but I bet a lot of people have some, old iPods, iPads, whatever, Kindles. These things are all something you can and should consider trading in as you upgrade forward, or don't, as you leave technology behind and move to your cabin in the woods.
How else would you have 20 to 30 devices surrounding you? You can't trade them in. You got to keep them. But
sure.
that is a tip. What's the software pick of the week?
This one's kind of an unusual one. I don't think I've ever written about it until today, and I don't believe I ever had it as a pick. But Microsoft has created something called the Windows Phone App Studio. It's a web app, if you will, that's up on, I think it's on apps.microsoft.com or app. Let me make sure that's correct. Of course, I have my own link. I believe it's at apps.microsoft.com or apps.windowsphone.com or one of those URLs. But basically, what it lets you do is go through a wizard on the website and create your own Windows Phone apps. And there are two implications to this. One is that if you're a developer, you can create the frame of an app. And they have lots of nice templates and different app types you can go through. And then you can download the project. You can put it into Visual Studio, and you can modify it further through code. And so if there are things in the wizard that you can't modify on the web interface, you can go into the code interface and do it that way. And that actually works really well. And then you have the potential of putting that thing into the store, and other people could download it or even buy it if you want to sell that app. But you can also make personal apps with this kind of thing. If you go on a vacation or something goofy, or if you just have like a photo thing you want to create a native app with, you can do that through this tool. And so I played with this a little bit. I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but I was playing around with this today. And, you can create apps for, like, if you've gone on vacation to Europe or something and you want to create an app about your trip, you can create an app for, Amsterdam or Paris or wherever you might have visited. And you can put, connect to photos you have on SkyDrive, and it does all that kind of Microsoft services integration on the back. So it's kind of a fun thing. And if you're a Windows Phone user, I'd say across the board, it's kind of a fun thing just to look at, kind of see how apps can come together. But you can also launch from there into a full-blown, I'm actually creating an app and publishing it in the store. You have to have a Windows Phone developer account. But that's very inexpensive now. I think it's $19. And then you could potentially even publish one to the store, and it could be something that anyone could download from the store and get on their own phone as well.
How these apps remind me of the old CD-ROM days. It's like, oh yeah,
they're
here's
like
my vacation
game construction kit type apps, except except for apps, not games. Yeah.
Let's move on to the enterprise pick of the week. It looks like a typo. What do we got here, Mary Jo?
I know. I had in my story when I wrote about this, pigs do fly, right? Microsoft this week delivered a preview of Oracle software running on Windows Azure. Yes, that is not a typo, and you're not mishearing me. So if you remember, back in June, Microsoft and Oracle announced this really weird partnership that everybody was very surprised about. And they said they were going to work together to get Oracle's Java, their WebLogic server, and the Oracle database all running on Windows Azure and on Hyper-V on Windows Server. So, I think people were just kind of like, yeah, we'll see if that ever happens. Well, it did happen. This week they have the virtual machine images for the database, the WebLogic server, and the Java Development Kit, all available on Windows Azure. And there's lots of little things to know about this, like who's going to support it, and do you bring your own license, or does Oracle give you a license? There's lots of nitty-gritty parts. But the takeaway is they're really going forward with this, and it's going to be certified by Oracle that it's working, and certified by Microsoft as well. So if you've been hesitating to run Oracle on Azure because you're not quite sure if it's going to work as smoothly as you were hoping, I think this should take that worry away. We don't know when the GA version of this is coming, but it seems like they're really pushing full steam ahead with it, and it should be relatively soon, I bet.
Somebody in the chat room was wondering if this was part of the like America's Cup bet. If Microsoft would work with Oracle, maybe, possibly. Now,
right, that's why Larry won this time.
He worked really hard for this one, so he can get Microsoft backing. What's the codename pick of the week?
Codename pick of the week is InfoNav. So InfoNav stands for Info Navigator, and what this is a natural language query capability. Microsoft talked about this a bit earlier this year when they talked about this product called Power BI for Office 365. And what Power BI is it's a whole suite of data analytics and business intelligence tools. There's like Power Pivot, Power View, Power Query, Power Maps, or all these parts. But the most interesting thing that Microsoft added to the public preview of Power BI that's out right now this week is this InfoNav. The final name for InfoNav is Q&A, if you ever see that spelled out. And so now when you're using Power BI tools on Office 365, you can actually use this natural language query capability to ask the tools to do things for you in plain old English instead of having to set up a very specialized query and having to know how to query a database. You can just ask in normal English, like, show me the top sales guys in this region and graph that for me, and boom, you have it. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting capability. I think we're going to see InfoNav, this natural query capability, show up in other Microsoft products at some point, but so far we haven't heard it show up anywhere else besides Power BI.
And now for the most important part of the show, the beer pick of the week. What is this week's beer pick of the week?
Yeah, so this week I stayed close to home for my beer pick of the week, and I picked a beer from Brooklyn called 6 Point Autumn Nation. And this is a really interesting beer. This is the second time I think they've brewed it. And last year they made it a pumpkin beer when they brewed this at 6 Point, but this year they decided no pumpkin. Instead, we're going to make it a wet hopped beer, which means they take the hops without drying them and they throw them into the beer when they're making it. And it gives the beer a really, really fresh taste. So this year it's still called Autumn Nation. It still has the same look and feel on the can pretty much. But the difference is it's a wet hopped beer and they're using mosaic hops, which is a kind of a new strain of hops that's really interesting. I really like them. They almost have like a blueberry taste to them, but it's not a fruit beer by any means. It's definitely a hoppy, wet hopped, fresh fall beer. So you can find it around, not just in Brooklyn and New York, but sometimes you'll see it in cans in Whole Foods, in fact. So look in your local Whole Foods next time you're there, and you might be able to pick up a can of Autumn Nation.
Paul, you gonna try to get your hands on a 6 Point Autumn Nation?
No.
He's not a hop guy. He's not a hop fan.
You gotta expand. You can have all the stouts and the heavy stuff. I'll stick to the hoppy stuff. Mary Jo and I will stick to the hoppy stuff.
We will.
You can have them.
Thank you. More for us. Actually, that's no more for us anyway for the show, I think. I think this episode is as packed in as much Microsoft news as humanly possible. Now it's time for the shameless plugs, Paul. Are you ready?
You know, I'm curiously always unready for this, but
okay.
I am available online at winsupersite.com.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
And on Twitter at Thurrott, which is THURROTT.
And you are still working on an update for the Windows 8.1 or the Secrets to Windows 8.1 book?
Yeah, so I'm working. Yeah, this one's going to be self-published, so we don't have a name yet. But yeah, Windows 8. I don't know what we're going to call it. Windows 8.1 book for now. Yeah.
I like that code name. It'll be next week's code name.
It's codenamed Windows 8.1 book. Yeah.
How about you, Mary Jo? Where can people find you online?
I'm on allaboutmicrosoft.com and on Twitter at Mary Jo Foley. And next week, we should mention, Paul and I are going to be doing Windows Weekly live from Las Vegas.
Oh, that's right.
Because we're going to be speaking at the Dev Connection show. And on Thursday, we're going to actually have a live studio audience, we're hoping. We hope they show up at the show. And we're going to be Skyping in with you guys like we do now. But it should be kind of fun to have people be able to ask questions live from the audience.
We should be doing it live from Rira.
Oh, yeah, we should. That's our favorite beer bar in Las Vegas. So.
Yeah, so your guys' background would look a little different if you're watching the video version.
Yeah.
I will still be sitting right here.
You wouldn't be able to see us. It's as dark as night in there.
Oh,
how are we going to do that?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
He means in the bar, I think.
Yeah, in the bar.
You can make it happen.
I thought you meant at the show.
Oh no, I'm sure they have lights at the show.
Anyways, if you can get all the, if you want to like listen to old Microsoft news, you're like, hey, what did they do last week? Go to twit.tv/WW. We've got all of the archives there, and Leo Laporte's even on the show when he's on vacation. So
occasionally.
Next week I'll be sitting here, so I won't be in Las Vegas with these folks. I'll be sitting in this chair, I think, or maybe over there. Who knows? But I think that's going to be a great show. I can't wait for that. That does it for us. We record, I think it's 11 o'clock or so every Thursday on Pacific time, and that's something UTC. Leo's really good at that math, and I'm really bad at it. So I need an app for that. I'm going to use that Windows Phone App Studio and build me one of those time conversion things.
ZuluTime.com or whatever.
Something like that. We'll see everybody next week. Thanks for watching Windows Weekly.
Guys, I don't know what happened with my Skype connection today, but it was a disaster.
There was like echoing and like.
Well, at least it was right in the beginning, though. That's a lot better than nice. I won't drink it.
Make him drink the 6 point.
I can smell the hops.